Hey everybody, this is week 3 of Ask a Property Manager, and we have Andrew Schultz of Realty Edge on the show again. Thanks for being on with us, Andrew.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
I don't know why I say us. It's just me. I think I'm used to the podcast with Steve, but so just a quick recap. Andrew works for Realty Edge. He's an associate broker, so he's a property manager as well of about 120 doors. Is that correct?
That sounds about right, yeah.
Yep, and that's in the Buffalo, New York, Western New York area, if you're familiar. And we got 4 questions this week, and what we're doing is we're pulling questions from our Facebook group. It's called Rent Prep for Landlords, and these are some of the good questions, and we're going to kind of do a deeper dive into each question. And this week we're going to talk about all 4 questions up front real quick, just so you kind of have an idea what this episode's about, and then Andrew is going to kind of give us some insights on each question. So, first question is from Monica. She talks about having to pay utilities for tenants and what do you do as far as like leaving them in your name versus their name. The second question we'll be talking about comes from Tanika. Hopefully I'm saying that correct. And she's talking about how often do you do a full paint versus just kind of a touch-up paint in between turnovers. And then Julie had a question about, damages like knobs, screen doors, window blinds, and, what exactly do you charge or what do you just kind of, chalk up to cost of doing business? And the last question we have comes from Rebecca, and she's just looking for advice on how to find a good handyman, essentially. So people who have 50 units or less, you don't have the kind of money to have somebody on staff full time, but you need somebody reliable because you can't do it yourself. You don't have the time anymore. So you ready to go into these questions in further detail?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So first question, again, that came from Monica. And I'll read this word for word here. She said, I have gotten stuck having to pay utilities for tenants by leaving them in my name. So now I just turn it all off and rent out house this way. What do you do?
So the way we have it set up is in Western New York, and most utility companies offer this. I don't think it's a thing that's exclusive to Western New York. They offer what's called leave-on for landlord accounts. So when the old tenant moves out, it'll default back to the property owner's name. So we have that set up for all of our properties so that it rolls back to us. And the bills just start coming to our office. So then when the incoming tenant comes in, what we require of them is they have to call and establish their utility accounts by the morning of their move-in, or they don't get to move in. It's pretty straightforward. The morning of the move-in, we call the utility company, verify that the utility is coming out of our name and that the tenant has put it in their name. And if the utility account's not set up, or if there's a hold on the account or something like that, they don't get to move in until that is straightened out. I like to have utilities on, especially in Buffalo, with our winters and stuff like that. You have to have your heat on.
Sure.
But even during the summer, I like to have the electric and stuff on because I go in and turn on all the lights, open all the blinds to make the place as bright as possible. So I always like to have the utilities on for that reason. But in order to prevent tenants from not turning utilities on in their name, we just make sure that it's done before they move in. Mm-hmm. And they're made aware of it. It's part of that. We talked I think the first podcast or video, we spoke about, the tenant move-in procedure.
Yep.
That's one of the things that's part of our tenant move-in procedure. And they're made aware of it. They know that they have to turn the utilities on and they know that they can't move in unless it's done. So that's how we avoid that problem. As far as water utility goes, in most areas of Western New York, water becomes a lienable bill. So what that means is if you don't pay your water bill, the city will put a lien against your property, and if it still remains unpaid, they'll sell your property at tax auction for water bills. So we leave those water bills in the property owner's name and have them sent to us. If the tenant's responsible for the water bill, we just back bill it to the tenant and they pay it with their next month's rent. We found that if you leave a bill to a tenant, they either don't pay it or they leave a portion of it unpaid when they move out or something like that. Mm-hmm. So we control the water bill because it becomes a lienable bill. But the utilities, the gas and electric, we require the tenants usually to put those on in their name.
Okay. I actually learned a little bit there. I might need to call and get a landlord account for my rentals.
Yeah, remind me later and I'll shoot you the forms. I actually have them saved on my computer.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. The second question here, again, I believe the name is Tanika. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. She said, how often do you fully paint versus touching up? I was going to fully paint this time, but was told by 2 different people to just touch it up. We fully painted 3 years ago. Opinions. So what's your opinion? Yeah.
If it needs paint, paint it, is basically what it boils down to. We basically use the same 2 color codes on all of our apartments. We have I call it landlord beige. We have a beige that we use on all of our walls. and then we usually do just a white trim. If the woodwork is battered up or whatever, we'll just paint it out to white.
Hmm.
And the beige that we use, we paint it flat. We don't put a sheen on it at all, no eggshell or anything like that, because it's very easy to touch up.
Okay.
I can go in and touch up just small spots where needed.
So if you
The
put
other,
that sheen on, though, you think it's a little more difficult to touch up then?
yeah, if you put the sheen on, like especially if you're going with anything more than like an eggshell or a satin,
Hmm.
what happens is when you paint, it does what's called flashing, where you'll be able to very visibly see the sheen of the new paint versus the sheen of the old paint.
Okay.
So we just leave it flat, and then you never have to worry about it, being very, very obvious.
What about
The other
like
thing to do
bathroom or
is
kitchen? Do you still do that for those as well? Because I know some people like to have more of a
generally,
sheen.
yeah, generally in the bathrooms we will go with a little bit higher of a sheen, maybe like a semi-gloss or something like that in the bathrooms, but that tends to be easier to wipe down. Also, bathrooms are usually fairly small. If you have to repaint it, it's not the end of the world.
Hmm.
But in order to kind of keep the cost of turnovers down, we like to use in the main rooms, your living, your dining, your bedrooms, we like to use the flat because it's easier to touch up.
Do you know the name of that landlord beige color that you use offhand?
Holmes Cream. You can get it at Home Depot.
Is that
I think
OLMS?
it's HOLMES
Okay,
Cream.
Holmes Cream.
I think it's CREME actually.
Okay.
Um, I had it color matched at Home Depot. Originally, it was a Sherwin-Williams color, but I like the Behr paint products better.
Okay.
So I had it color matched at Home Depot, and we buy it by the 5-gallon bucket, and obviously we're going to use it, so we just store it and use it as needed.
Cool. That's good advice there. I like that.
Hmm.
The next question here that comes from Julie. She says, when a tenant breaks things like doorknobs, screen doors, window blinds, etc., which is a result of not taking good care of the property, does it come out of my pocket or is it charged to them? They pay rent on time and they still continue to live at the property. This is in California.
So the way we have our leases worded, we can back bill a tenant for something that they break. So if they put a doorknob through a piece of drywall, for instance, very common, happens all the time.
Hmm.
We have the ability to go back in and fix that and then charge the tenant for it. We send them a letter, we send them the invoice, and tell them this is due and payable with your next month's rent. Please stop breaking things. There's a difference between normal wear and tear and tenant damages.
Yep.
You really have to look at the situation to make a determination. Is this something the tenant truly caused through negligence, or is this something that is wear and tear? I had a client that wanted us to charge a tenant to replace the carpet in an entire room because when the door opened to the room, the bottom would kind of drag across the carpet a little bit, and
Yep.
it created a wear mark. He wanted us to charge against the tenant's security deposit for that, and I told him, no, that's not the tenant's fault. It's a wear and tear item. Why don't we do this properly? We'll trim the door so it's not, causing this issue in the future,
Sure.
and go from there. So you have to be fair with your tenants at the end of the day. I see a lot of comments on the Facebook group, especially about, do I pay? Does the tenant pay? Take a step back, look at the situation from an outside perspective, if you will. Did the tenant cause the damage, or is it a wear and tear item? And it should be pretty easy to make that determination in about 90% of instances. So
Sure. How do you exactly go about it? So, like, let's say there is egregious damage, like punched a hole in the wall, but for some reason you want to, you're going to have this tenant there for a while anyways. How exactly do you go about that? Do you just call them and once you find that damage and let them know, hey, that you're going to be paying for this next month? Like, what kind of notification do you give them?
So typically what we'll do is, more often than not, the times that we discover damages are when one of our contractors is in the property doing a maintenance repair,
Mm-hmm.
or when we're doing one of our inspections on a quarterly basis or something like that. We photograph the damage. We indicate, we'll send a letter to the tenant telling them, we've discovered this damage. We're coming in on this date and time to repair it, and you're going to be invoiced for it. And then after the work is done, we'll get photos. Our contractors are very good about sending us before and after photos of every job that they do. We send the tenant the before and after photos along with a copy of the invoice and telling them this amount, this is what it costs to fix your damage. this is what you're being billed for. It's due and payable with your next month's rent. And that's all part of our leasing procedure as well. It's all in our lease so that we can do that.
And they can just lump that into that one check. There's no problem with that. It doesn't need to be
Yeah,
separate.
no problem with that at all. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And I think that kind of tees up the last question nicely because we're talking about your contractor there. Rebecca, she had a question. She said, a question for all landlords with 50 units or less. How do you handle maintenance issues? We are too big enough, or excuse me, we are too big to do them ourselves, and we also own and run another business, but we aren't big enough to have or want an employee. This question is for everyday maintenance issues in turns, not for like new roofs or major building renovations. Where do you all find your jack-of-all-trade contractors willing to work 10 hours one week and maybe 40 the next? Craigslist doesn't seem to be cutting it for us.
We've had good luck on Craigslist. We've used Craigslist. We've used Thumbtack. We've run ads in newspapers. We've gone out and actively looked for, go to Home Depot, talk to the guys at the Pro Desk at Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever your favorite, hardware store is. They always know who the good contractors are, the guys that are reasonably priced, the one-man shops, stuff like that. Those are going to be the type of contractors you're going to want to target. And then when you have those bigger jobs, keep them in mind. Let them come in and bid on your apartment renovations and stuff like that if they're capable. I could probably talk for 20 minutes just on contractors, but a couple of things to always keep in mind. It's not a contract unless it's in writing. Make sure they're insured and make sure you control the draw. And what I mean by control the draw is make sure you're controlling when they get paid, not them telling you, I'm at this point, I need to be paid. Inspect the job as you're going along to make sure that things are being done to your specifications and to the level that you're satisfied with. Contractors have a tendency to kind of overbook themselves, I guess I would say. They'll start a job, they'll come back like 2 weeks later and do a little bit. They'll come back 2 weeks later and do a little bit. Don't be afraid to set a timeline on a job that a contractor has to have it completed by X date or whatever, and just communicate. That's the biggest thing. Communicate with the contractors, because finding a good contractor, it's tough. I'm not going to lie. Finding a good contractor is tough, but once you have that relationship, it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah.
Many of the contractors that I'm working with, we actually don't have an on-staff handyman. We tried it once, twice, 3 times. We tried it 3 times and just could not. Could not make it work. So we sub everything, but we're at the point now where we give our guys enough work that we're getting preferred rates from them, and we're kind of their preferred customer because they always know that they're going to have work. They always know they're going to get paid in a timely fashion.
Yep.
They're willing to kind of give us those breaks, or if we need something in a pinch, they're kind of willing to make that leap for us. So
yeah.
Just establishing those good relationships with a few contractors is going to make your life infinitely easier.
Yeah. And I think Jonathan maybe commented on this post. I don't know if it was this one, but he also said, like, if you're looking for a plumber, try, a plumbing supply store. Like, same thing, like you're saying, is going to the Home Depot Pro Desk. Like, go to the places where contractors go to get their stuff. And if they're there that often, they can spot who's good and who's not, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're going to know. I mean, and like I said, make sure that any contractor you're using has general liability insurance at a very minimum. And I mean, different states have different requirements for licensing and this and that and the other thing. I'll be honest with you, most handyman stuff doesn't require licensing and permits. And if you're going to have somebody come in and change a doorknob, there's, you don't need a license for that. It's a handyman type task. So. Yeah. But make sure that they have at least general liability insurance at the bare minimum, so that if something does happen, at least you have an insurance policy that you can go back against. When
you're checking them on that, is that just like a document that they can kind of send you, just a certificate? Yeah. Yeah,
it's called an ACORD sheet, ACORD, and it's a national standard sheet. You can ask for it from the contractor. Will call their insurance company and say, hey, I need an ACORD sheet showing this owner as additional insured for work being performed at this property. And they generate the sheet and send it to the contractor. The contractor can send it to you.
Okay, cool. That's good information. Hey, well, that's another week of Ask a Property Manager here with Andrew Schultz. And Andrew, thank you for your advice and your insights on all this stuff. I'm learning stuff every week, which is awesome. So hopefully people
I love doing these.
Yeah, very cool. Looking forward to doing more, and we will see everyone next week.
Sounds good.